Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Startup of the Year podcast. I'm Frank Gruber, the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, the co-founder of Established Ventures, the team behind the Startup of the Year community, and this very podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk with entrepreneur and inventor Patrick Sherwin about his company GoSun. GoSun was founded with the goal of making outdoor cooking easier, cleaner, and more accessible for people in both developed and emerging markets. It's gone on to expand out of just cooking, and they're doing a bunch of different things with solar. And I'm really excited about his endeavor. I've been following him for a while, so looking forward to catching up with Patrick shortly. But before we jump into the interview, I wanted to remind you about our mission here at Startup of the Year in our community. We're all about helping startup founders all along the startup journey. And that can be through a number of different ways. We've got our community programs and resources that help educate and build relationships. We also offer opportunities to celebrate all the wins all along the way. And it all culminates in our Startup of the Year annual summit and awards. Those will be coming up here shortly, so look for some announcements about that. But in the meantime, I just urge you to join our community today and become a part of this growing group of founders helping founders. And if you do so before September 30th, you'll be eligible for our 2021 Startup of the Year Awards. So that's an important thing to remember. If you get your application in and do that before the 30th of September, you get a chance to potentially be a part of the 100 companies that will be invited to take part in our summit. That'll be in a new location this year in person, and it'll be an opportunity to connect, showcase, and potentially take home the title of Startup of the Year. And not to mention, I'll be there. It'll be a lot of fun. A lot of our team will be there, and we'll have investors and mentors and thought leaders and corporate innovators there as well. So definitely get your application in. Just go to soty.link/apply. soty.link/apply and become a part of the fun. All right, now let's talk to Patrick Sherwin of GoSun. All right, welcome, Patrick. So great to have you here today. It's been a while since we last connected. I think it might have been at CES a few years ago, before the world changed. So great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Frank. It's a real honor.
Yeah, and let's just to kind of level set, get everybody on the same page. Can you share what you're doing at GoSun, just so everyone understands what you're all about?
Sure. I've been into solar for a couple of decades, and that was kind of the gateway to solving all kinds of power and water and waste needs, lighting, cooking, cooling. And ultimately, I came up with a bunch of portable powered appliances that can help you live a more resilient and independent life. And we've been doing this now for 8 years, and we've been largely funded through the crowd. So between Kickstarter, and we're also doing some equity crowdfunding now as well.
Very, very cool. So you've been looking at solar. You came up with an idea. Where did that idea come from, and how did that first spark? So 8 years ago, you were thinking, "Gosh, I just hopefully you weren't staring at the sun or something like that." But just tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking and how the idea came to be.
Yeah, I think it started, obviously long before that, and it was largely stemming out of environmental motivations. When I was a kid, I watched a creek in my backyard that I had built as an amazing ecosystem for fish and amphibians get destroyed by a neighbor kid that threw a bunch of motor oil in the creek. And that made me realize the power and impact that humans can have. And then you learn in high school about, the pollution was what we called it back then, before climate change, before we knew about climate change necessarily. And I really wanted to focus on solving these issues, and removing the stupidity of man. I jumped into the solar industry in college. Was lucky enough to find a solar company in the phone book, and kind of stuck with the solar industry ever since. And really the inception of GoSun happened almost like they saw it by ad hoc invention. I had taken a hot water heater that was a solar system off of a rooftop. Instead of throwing it in the dump, I took it home and I was tinkering on it, and I discovered that it was an incredible way to make food. Had never been used for cooking. It had always been used for heating water. And, that was the aha moment, and that led to several other aha moments. Then I saw Kickstarter, and Realized that was my path for launching a consumer brand, where we build these appliances that are portable and durable so that you can take them into your, and then, the other part of my backstory has a lot to do with like outdoor recreation, camping and living in remote places, living off grid, in the Caribbean and in the mountains. And so the products are built to kind of pair well with off-grid living and be kind of the better, more 21st century versions that are free of propane or charcoal and free of ice and things that you have to buy and burn.
Very, very cool. So it sounds like you were living kind of an adventurous lifestyle and you realized this is something that you needed to kind of be able to survive. And so you created the first product, which is this GoSun stove, right? And that stove, I'm trying to explain it. Let's explain it for the listener. So it's almost like a cylindrical, like silver rod that's about I'd say about 2 feet long. Is that about right?
Yeah. Yep.
And you put your food in there and then you just let it cook via the sun. Is that right?
You got it. It takes literally just 20 minutes to make a meal for a couple of people. And it's the reason why it works so well is the glass tube, which is like a Pyrex, is double walled with a vacuum between the two walls of glass. And that makes nearly a perfect insulator. So it works when it's freezing cold or like even in cloudy days, it'll still cook. And now we have one that's hybrid. So there's an electric heating element inside. So you can cook day or night, indoors or out.
Very, very cool. So you started with this, you got it out there, put it on Kickstarter. How did that go? Or what was the trajectory from there that kind of kept you moving forward?
Yeah, I was working as like a freelance consultant doing a bunch of design and installation work in the solar industry. And then this was sort of a muse. It had been a muse for nearly a decade before launching.
Gotta love the side hustle. And gotta love those side hustles.
Yeah, this was basically a side hustle initially. And I had an email list of about 1,000 people, like colleagues in the industry over 15 years or so. And when I launched on Kickstarter, the first day we made 13 grand. Over 7 weeks, we made 200 grand. And that was just me and a buddy kind of working on the side hustle. And I basically abandoned my previous work as a freelance consultant designer. I told all my clients, hey, I got this invention that's taking off. I'm going to go, my side hustle is now my full-time gig. And from that point, it was sort of the 80-hour work week for a few years, draining your life savings, hiring, the best young talent I could find, building, relations with, mainly e-commerce oriented business, a lot of international distribution, figuring out, customer support, logistics. And, I tried to stay more on the creative as much as I could, the new development, the new product. What was the new horizon? What were customers asking for? And so we focused on expanding throughout the solar cooking space. As I mentioned, we made them larger. We made a few more portable, smaller. We made the hybrid. And then we pivoted a few years ago into other solar powered appliances. You have the obvious stuff like charging your phone and lights, but also we made the world's first solar cooler. And it's literally a portable refrigerator that can run on the sun.
Wow, that's very cool.
And I can carry on, but as far as where the business took us with respect to the different innovations over time.
I want to actually rewind for a second because I think you talked about a lot there, and I think what I wanted to dive into, and I love the fact you've expanded into all these different areas, and we can jump into those too. But you mentioned a point there that I know well, and I know others listening probably do as well. It's that inflection point where you're like, oh man, this is a side thing, but I need to take it full time. How did you feel when you were jumping, just literally your toes on the edge of the diving board, getting ready to take this full time?
Best. Oh my goodness. Yeah. The feeling, I went into work the day I launched on Kickstarter and the day we did 13K, and I felt like a king. I mean, I just felt like a billionaire. And so, all of those random hopefuls, all those, I don't like to have too many expectations in life, but it all came true literally, in that day, in that moment. And that happens a lot now when we launch new ideas. Those first days, those first few hours of the launch are so exciting. And you get that you get that hype generated, which we all enjoy. And making the decision was completely natural and intuitive to just put my whole heart and soul into this business. And it turns out I didn't admit to myself, because I was maybe 37 years old at the time, and I was built for it. That I was kind of an entrepreneur without really knowing it or trying. And that I was somewhat gifted in the realm of coming up with an idea and knowing that it had a market, and then figuring out and assembling a team, and kind of going through the commonsensical steps of building that enterprise and keeping that brand moving forward and keeping innovations pouring out.
And had you had any experience building a consumer product before, or was this your first rodeo with that?
Pretty much. I was kind of an inventor, tinkerer throughout my life, and I had made a few things where people were like, "Oh, I'd love one of those," and I might make one or two for friends and family. But it was never anything that I took necessarily to the internet and sold thousands of. So this is my first real rodeo in what's a real viable startup. I had a couple other startups that I ran an electric vehicle charging infrastructure, solar charging infrastructure business in Asheville, North Carolina. I started that with some buddies, and we did decent. We did okay. It was really hard. It was like a highly regulated space, and we were like 10 years ahead of our time. And then I ran my own consultancy business for a while and had sort of a small exit from that. So, I was relatively familiar with small business and kind of startup, but this was a real robust, kind of a high growth, a hardware startup.
Right. And so I think our listeners would love to know how you went about that, being new. How did you move forward with figuring it out? I mean, was it trial and error? Were there certain steps? Because I think there's probably listeners out there that have ideas that want to take it and create a consumer product, but have no idea how to start. And so if there's anything we can do to help that, I think that would be a huge win.
You are a huge helper. I'll tell you what, Frank, you helped me in a big way. Several times we've run into each other, and Frank, you're the type of guy who will actually follow through on saying like, yeah, I got a buddy that might be interested, I'll hit you up. Sure enough, you hear that a million times at a trade show. Frank Gruber will actually give you that buddy's email.
Right. Well,
it's all it's all that. It's about being more oriented around execution than talk. And then, you have to really be grounded in common sense. So I was daunted. You're always daunted by something that you've never done, and you think only the Musks and the Bezos of the world could figure. No, it's really one day at a time, step by step, and you just climb the ladder. And there has never been, it's been overwhelming from time to time. It's been seriously stressful. It's strained my personal relationships, but I've ended up day by day, moment by moment. And I think, I've always, when it got really intense and overwhelming, I've always said, hey, this is a test of what you're capable of. It's not, don't look at it like a big ball of stress and difficulty. The business, the market, the world is asking you to rise to this opportunity and this occasion. And I just sort of met that with as much energy and intelligence as I could. And what was, draining my life savings in 80-hour weeks for maybe 3 or 4 years, became a salary. And, I've had some 40-hour weeks and some vacation time. I still work probably 50, 60 hours, but it's like there's a pace to it now. I've got balance back. And I've got a brand with significant value, and I feel like I've given something, to the world. So it's extremely gratifying, all in all. Demanding, yes. It's probably a lot like having children. It's just you can't have a perfect plan, and certainly, again, common sense says that your plan's going to have to change, and that you're going to have to adjust to whether this product was a success or a failure, or the feedback you're getting from customers or from, employees or your engineer or your manufacturing partners. We've had to make so many adjustments and pivots, and we've had to avoid so many pitfalls along the way, but we never really have lost that core excitement, passion. I think, that sense of purpose has really driven the business forward.
That makes sense. And I loved what you said a minute ago about one day at a time, step by step. That's something I really believe in. I know, got a friend actually started a company around that phrase, and sells gear and stuff related to it, because it's so true. Like you're not going to build Rome in a day, right? You're going to, it's going to take every little brick. Right. And so I love that approach, because if you try to solve it all in one day, you're going to feel overwhelmed. Right. And so,
definitely. And I think the financial side of it is an important one, where if you're thinking about money through the whole process, you're kind of really shooting yourself in the foot. You're gonna have to have many more desires and be much more sophisticated than money. Whether that's, again, making an impact, developing relationships, just learning and having fun. I mean, if you're in the startup world and your main motivation and your maybe your most exclusive is money, you're probably going about it the wrong way. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a path for making money, but you're probably not going to make any anytime soon, and you're going to have to ask everybody and his brother to get theirs so that you could try to put some forward. And the actual opportunity for an exit where you're actually going to be rich and a millionaire is so extremely rare. Don't fool yourself. Have fun with it. Be you, do you, and try not to get caught up in the chase of money. It's just only one small indicator of real wealth.
Success. Yep, absolutely. So it sounds like you guys have been having fun. I'm curious, how has your team grown? Like, how has that looked? And then on top of that, let's answer that one first, I guess, and we'll jump to the next question. Yeah.
We're now at about 15 people. And
Right.
Again, we've kind of grown fairly organically.
Mm-hmm.
And there was only one time where we had a little bit too much staff, and the direction that we were heading didn't really work, so we had to thin out a little bit. And thinning out happened by itself naturally. It was people that we were trying to get more into retail stores, so we had a sales staff, and we'd opened a lot of doors, but then people weren't getting sell through because our products are not kind of mainstream ready quite yet.
That makes sense. So I'm curious then, it kind of is along those same lines, is like your products, you started like with the stove, and you mentioned it went into the batteries and the powering your devices. And then now you've got a cooler, which is really interesting. And you've got on your site, it's really cool. That Pro Kitchen setup is killer. I want one of those, right? But what I'm curious about is, how did you decide like when it was the right time to launch an additional product? Because I think that's something that entrepreneurs may not know that right timing. Like they've got this one thing and they are focused on it and they love it and they want to keep focusing on growing this consumer product. When was the right time to shift gears, and what made you want to do that?
For me, it's always another idea on the horizon that I'm working on. So it's almost, the question's the opposite. Like, when, Patrick, when are you going to stop launching new products because you're exhausting your development team? But for us, we kind of from the beginning, since we were a crowdfunded company, we tried to bake in a product launch every year, and it seemed to be rather easy and intuitive to meet that. And then as we got bigger, once we got to maybe the third or fourth year, with upwards of getting close to 10 staff, we are starting to do 2 product launches every year. And that's assuming that you have a product launch that you really know is innovative and market ready. But that's how it has worked for us. So just speaking of where my business has led us, we did have to produce new products. And actually, like early on, crowdfunding and new product launches were about half of our revenue. So for the first several years, if we didn't launch a new product, we could have been dead in the water. And in fact, we had a moment, I think it was 2017, where we were working on this cooler, which was kind of a big pivot. and we were running, like the stoves were selling as well as we had hoped. So we were running out of capital, and had the cooler launch not worked, we could have gone bankrupt. So
Right.
these are drivers, of course, of when, but I think, the real answer is, your team, like new product development takes time. And we had one or two products that we launched before we were ready, and we thought we had a really good plan to go into manufacturing or development, but in fact it cost way more than we had expected. And so we weren't ready, and that was probably rushed. So we've learned over time, but I think the main driver is, we have more needs to meet, and that's definitely not going to change across the planet. And then speed is really important, and I do have an idiom, like, like it's better to be, to get it done is better than perfect. And that, since there's nobody really in the space that we're in, working with breakthrough portable solar products to meet essential needs, we're okay with launching things that are a B plus instead of an A plus. And so, sometimes our product launches aren't like just polished and impeccable. We're not Apple, and we're okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that's important too. Perfection is sometimes the enemy, right? Of moving things forward and success. So makes a lot of sense to me. So curious about how you mentioned you've got a lot of different products now, and how do you keep your team focused? And then I'm going to shift gears. A quick answer around that, and we'll shift gears. I want to talk about crowdfunding.
Great. Our customers and the amount of products that we have out in circulation, and the amount of development needs that we see on our backlog of product developments keeps our team focused. The team is fairly young. I'd say highly motivated. A lot of purpose orientation. And we take time to enjoy each other and enjoy off time. Like, we just did a great float trip down a local river. In years past, we've gone on multi-day trips. So we'll do, every quarter or so, we'll take a day and kind of talk big picture, or break out and do more planning sessions. So that's been, again, relatively intuitive and kind of a joy to work with the team. It turned out I'm a decent motivator or manager of a millennial workforce, because I think a lot like a millennial, even though I think I'm more of a Gen Xer. But I want to do the right thing, and I want to do it in a smart and easy way, rather than the kind of drudgery. So whenever we have work that turns into the mundane, we try to outsource that, so that we're always doing something creative and different, and always learning.
That's a great point. Outsource the mundane. That's a great takeaway. And then also, I'm curious. You're all in the same place, or you're all in Cincinnati? Is that correct?
Yeah, there's like 10 of us in the office, and then another 10 in subcontractors throughout the world. Gotcha.
Makes sense. Because I was curious how you were handling remote and whatnot with COVID and all that. Has it affected you guys a lot?
It did, back in March, April, May of 2020, and it was so scary for everybody at that time, right?
Absolutely.
But at the same time, our business was going nuts. And so, like, I thought I would get this break and I'd put my feet up and I'd get a little chill time. No, the business was just demanding, and we had orders coming in like never before. And that hasn't really stopped, to be honest. So we're back together. We stayed away. We worked from home for about 2 months. We have a really nice work environment where we have a big space with, it's hard to describe, but basically it's very open and creative space. So we like to be together. However, I am really working to embrace more remote, and really working to make sure people are, I don't know how you say it, but ultimately finding a work-life balance, trying to really work on themselves as well.
That's great. And you made me kind of have a flashback there of March 2020-ish timeframe, when people were, it was kind of a scary time in the world. It still is a scary time in the world, but it was definitely a scarier time in the world. And more or less, there were thoughts of like, going to the grocery store and not having anything in the grocery store because there were just not enough supplies. So I could totally see where like your stoves and, kind of off-grid kind of components, coolers and things would be pretty popular. So that makes a lot of sense to me about that timing.
Yeah, exactly. Remember the toilet paper scare? I mean,
yeah, you guys, everyone's, and so more or less people are getting your stoves and getting all your stuff just in case there's apocalypse or something happening.
Yep. No, COVID has been a win for us from a business perspective in that two trends: outdoor recreation, look at the trailheads, everyone's going outside and that's great. And then the preparedness, and preparedness is now shared by more of a mainstream mindset. You don't have to think bullets and bombs and bunkers and
right.
but think about toilet paper now.
Right, absolutely. But I think people thought about the other as well. Just there was a rise in all of it. Anyway, let's move on to crowdfunding. You've done a lot of crowdfunding in your career here, and with GoSun, you've been successful with doing that. So I wanted to get so all of our listeners out there wanted to understand like your learnings from that. If there's anything you could share about crowdfunding, maybe think back to like the first time you did it and what you learned in that experience, and then every time you've done it since.
Yeah, I think the video is a big important element, and trying to keep the first like 10 seconds of the video super relevant and kind of try to nail a brand promise. And often you might say even like the first 5 or 3 seconds, really, really focusing a lot of the creative effort in how you're going to communicate right there at the beginning. And, we've found that over time, there's other people that are much better at doing things such as Facebook marketing, Facebook ads. There's now services that are basically like the pre-launch service to your pre-order sale.
Interesting.
And
so there's a whole marketplace or another market of companies that help with the marketplace, basically.
Yeah, and they literally build a giant email list before you launch your Kickstarter.
Wow.
And that turns out that's really helpful, because then when you come out of the gate, you've got, your first 500 backers have already jumped in right on day one. And so when people look at you day 2, there's already $50,000, and there's all that peer validation that happens right off the rip.
It reminds me a little bit of books, publishers, right? Like they do a similar thing with publishing books. You have your family, friends, and everybody try to pre-order, right? To get it, stack it up, and then
book tours ahead of the launch. And
Yep.
That's been an interesting new insight. I think you do want to have something innovative, and today, more and more stuff is it's all about video production, media production, social media shares. And so, you want something that's looks attractive, that's got a nice, cute little animation, that's got some After Effects and some numbers and digits swarming in at the images. You kind of have to hit people in the visual element first, and hope that visual element will stand on its own and explain, what this product is and how it works. So those are all important. And I would say that like I literally, my first Kickstarter, I built the video, 90% of the video was shot on an iPhone and then edited in iMovie and recorded in my basement with my iPhone microphone.
Love that.
So that was like $3,000 or less of production time and energy. Now I think companies are spending over $100,000 just to get their media assets together.
Wow. That's what I was going to ask you. Is it become literally too expensive for the real true, maker / startup to do this? Or is there still potential?
Oh, I think it's still all about the innovation, and that's the beauty of crowd. The crowd it's still all about peer reaction and validation. So if you have something really cool and a pretty poor video, let's hope you can still convey what it actually is and does, and price it right, and promise a decent, ship date and all that, and build that confidence. I'll still support stuff that's pretty rough around the edges, C grade, but because I think most of the people still shopping on those platforms are more early adopters, and they're willing to accept. But yeah, I think it's something we find more from somewhat more established brands. Basically, I'm spending maybe 15 grand now. I mean, I'm still pretty frugal, and I don't go nuts on video. But some of the brands that we compete with will do these $100,000 videos, and then they'll do, multi-million-dollar campaigns.
Wow.
And so, like I said, video helps.
Absolutely. So that's crazy. I mean, that's a lot more than what it used to. I remember when it first started, and it was literally just like you said, you could put an iPhone movie out there. So, but you can still do that, right? There's still that component. It just may not be as snazzy as some of the other ones that are out there.
Yeah. And, people have created more of a formula to it all. There's the Launch Boom Academy. You can kind of rear up your idea quite well and really position it for success. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of directions to go, and it does. It's for me, like I mentioned at the beginning of this call, I really wasn't sure that this idea that I had was going to really take me anywhere. So I put a $40,000 cap. Like I needed to raise $40,000 before I would, kind of build these things and deliver them, because I knew what a challenge that was going to be. And that's the beauty of the do or die function on these crowdfunding. Both Indiegogo and Kickstarter have that. And so I set a really high bar, and we got to 200,000. I thought, okay, great, I'm in. I'm quitting everything else. We're going to do this. But you really want to make sure that you're not giving away the farm or promising the moon when you put a real low bar. I only need $500 to deliver. It's like, are you sure about that? You're going to have to make this thing in Asia, ship it across the world. And so, that's the evaluation that makers and entrepreneurs have to do. And again, you just have to try to get as commonsensical as possible, and really look at a calendar and look at your budget.
That makes a lot of sense. I think these are really great tips. So thank you for sharing some of your knowledge here. You've done a lot of it. I'm curious. One follow-up is: have you used both Kickstarter and Indiegogo, or what have you? You've used both? Okay. Are there other platforms you've used too, or no? Just those two?
Well, we're using a couple others now for the equity crowdfunding. So now that's raising capital.
Right. Excellent. You mind me asking which platforms you're on?
Yeah, that's startengine.com /GoSun is where we are.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So you can check that out. We'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can go check it out. Yep, absolutely. All right. So we're almost out of time here. I wanted to ask a couple questions just personal about like you as an entrepreneur. Like, who are some of your mentors that have kind of moved you, kind of helped move you through this over the last eight or so years as you kind of run this company? Yeah. What are some of the best mentors, people you kind of look up to, that kind of thing?
I've been super fortunate to have attracted VP of Development, Gary Starr. He born and raised in the Bay Area. He's done a ton of startups, and everything he's done has been focused in clean technology. He's the one that kind of ushered us into the floor at CES, and has really been driving a lot of the business's growth. And so without Gary Starr, I know that GoSun would not have had the growth trajectory that it's had. And that's just the luckiest mentor, business ally, and cohort, my partner in crime. And then, outside of Gary, a lot of my former employers have been pretty surprisingly supportive over time. Former bosses, former business owners that I've worked for have been incredibly insightful and encouraging, and then sort of some investors. We've got 3 or 4 private investors that have really done a lot to mentor with me, and we'll do like quarterly calls and, okay, Patrick, where are we at? And, how are we going to get there that you mentioned where we're going tomorrow? What can I do to support you in going there? And really kind of grounding a lot of and helping to integrate, this sort of visionary energy into a business model. Big picture, I love looking at people like Elon Musk, Bezos, Richard Branson, and I'll read their books and all of that. But and all of that is relatively relatable as well. But
fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like you found this one in Gary Starr. I'm curious, just how did you connect?
We met at Social Capital Markets, SoCap, out in San Francisco in like 2014. And I was doing a little solar demo, and he had done solar cooking in the 1970s. and been in solar heavily in the 80s and then in electric vehicles. And he was kind of like totally, interested in the technology that I developed. And so we became fast friends, and he's been our lead investor, you might say, active angel from, for the last 7 years. So it couldn't have asked for a better partner.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Sounds like you have, similar likes and thoughts around solar. So that's super important as well. So, all right, I think we're at time. I wanted to ask you, are there any other things you wanted to share maybe with people listening? Like you mentioned earlier, you've got that funding option open right now at is it startengine.com/GoSun. Is there anything else or any way that people could get connected with you if they wanted to ask you a question or something like that?
Welcome to email me, patrick@gosun.co. And gosun.co is our site. So it's been a pleasure, Frank. I really appreciate it. I think, we could talk all day.
We could, yeah,
I
absolutely.
think you hit all of the basics, and
Yep.
you're the real deal, man. You're just a fantastic networker, and I'm just really grateful to know you.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for the kind words. And best of luck with everything with GoSun. I'm continuing to follow along as you continue to push out different products and make it easier for people to create create whatever they're trying to do in a more sustainable way, I guess you could say.
That's right.
You're absolutely
More
so much,
resilient
Patrick.
and independent. That's what we're going for. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Patrick. I always love talking with founders and companies that are trying to help make the world a better place. And I really love the mission and can feel the passion coming through in your voice. So thanks so much for taking the time and sharing your insights here today. For those listening, I hope you enjoyed the episode and you took something interesting away from the conversation. If you enjoyed the conversation, please do share it with someone that you think will find it helpful. Sharing is caring, and we're all about it. So help spread the word and spread the love. Finally, I want to mention Open Grants because I think it's something that our listeners could really benefit from and knowing about. Open Grants is a platform, and it's a search engine for basically non-dilutive U.S. funding. So you can go out there and check out www.opengrants.io/established, and you can sign up for free and do a search for grants. And these are grants that could potentially power your startup, your nonprofit, some of your foundations, things of that nature. So nothing can compete with non-dilutive funding, so I urge you to check it out. Just go to www.opengrants.io/established. All right, so if you have a startup idea and you want to get it going, today is the best day to start up. Not tomorrow, not the next day. Don't wait. Get it going. Get iterating, and in doing so, I encourage you to join our community for access to support, expert advice, and resources that you'll need to elevate your startup. You can do so today by just applying online. Go to soty.link/apply and join the community. Until next time, I'm Frank Gruber signing off. Thanks again for listening. Wishing you the best of luck and future success in all of your startup adventures.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode soon.